The date has finally arrived. The game of our time. We finally know the answer to the most infamous question. Silksong when? The follow-up to the acclaimed Hollow Knight is finally released after 7 years of development. After Hollow Knight's release in 2019, the game went on to sell 2.8 million copies, which at the time was quite remarkable for an independent game. Then the developer Team Cherry went on to announce a DLC named Silksong. Eventually, it was revealed that Silksong would become a standalone game, and Team Cherry went radio silent. Since that announcement, the original Hollow Knight would go on to sell an additional 12 million copies. The release date was announced a mere 2 weeks prior to release, and once the date finally arrived, the sheer amount of people attempting to buy the game crashed all major digital storefronts, including the PlayStation Store, Nintendo eShop, and Steam, a feat of which I have not seen in my lifetime. Along with all of the copies Hollow Knight has sold, this immediately cemented Silksong as a cultural phenomenon. In this episode, I'm going to talk about my experience with the game, my experience with Hollow Knight, and my overall thoughts on these two games, as well as my thoughts on very popular recurring video game discourse, difficulty in games. But first, let's get into some housekeeping. Welcome. This is The Sticky Buttons. It's an internet radio show where we talk about the games we love. I'm your host, Blake McKean, and I just kind of wanted to acknowledge that I took a little break from the show. This was not planned. I announced it in my last episode, said I'd be back in September, and here I am. I got a spontaneous opportunity through my work to work abroad for a few weeks, which is just crazy. I mean, how often do you get that? I don't really think anybody gets that ever. So I just immediately jumped on that opportunity, and I got to work in and visit the lovely country of Luxembourg. And that is where I was when Silksong released. That's where I originally played it. And that kind of shaped my thoughts on the game in a kind of weird way. So I'm really excited to get into that. But before we get into that, I do kind of want to announce a new vision for the show. It's funny, being forced to take a break from something that you've been doing for 5 years, it's not always a bad thing. So having some time to reflect is important. And, with this show now being a solo endeavor, I wanted to change the tagline of the show. Previously, the tagline of the show, it's an internet radio show where we talk about the games we love. And one of the things I really liked about that tagline is that, we were focusing on only bringing games that we enjoyed to the show. And I still want to, retain that level of positivity. But, it's no longer a we, it's just me. So from here on out, the new tagline of the show is The Sticky Buttons, a show about games that are new to me and maybe new to you. And yeah, I mean, one of the things I loved about doing the show with the co-founder, Brandon, is getting out of my comfort zone. I personally really enjoyed that. That really challenged my taste. It challenged the games that I was willing to play. It challenged the games I was going to try. And throughout those journeys, I discovered some of my favorite games. Games like Hyper Light Drifter, Citizen Sleeper, or even Elden Ring. And, to be honest, it's really hard to try new games, especially if you're unsure. Obviously because of the financial aspect of it, but there's also the time commitment as well. I mean, we all have so much limited time on this earth, so sometimes picking up a new game is obviously hard to do. So that's kind of what I want the new direction of the show to be, is to kind of just talk about games that are new to me and maybe new to you. And if it's a game that you know and love, I think you'll at least find something out of it. And if it's new to you, you'll probably get a lot out of it. So that's kind of what I want to do from here on out. And I don't know, I think Silksong and Hollow Knight are kind of the perfect two games to talk about first. They're perfect games to tackle with this new tagline in mind. So grab your needle and let's jump into the land of Farloom. As you can probably tell by this point, the sound design and music are core to the experience of both Hollow Knight and Silksong. And I wanted to set my stage with my thoughts on Hollow Knight, which I did play about 2 years ago. And I don't think it made it to the show, and that's just because I didn't love it, honestly. And to be quite frank, I really struggled to get into Hollow Knight. For some reasons, I couldn't quite articulate until I started playing Silksong, so we'll get to those. But really, the most kind of like important thing about Hollow Knight, the first thing that you notice is the atmosphere. And that's one of the things I really struggled with most. I didn't really like the atmosphere. I found it very dark. I found it very oppressive. And you're this tiny character known as the Knight, and you navigate this dark world, and you take on bug enemies. If you're not familiar with the art style, they're not really grotesque, but they're gross and cute in a cartoony kind of way. And, I did like some things about Hollow Knight. I mean, one of the things that I personally loved about it is that when you're playing it, there's no question that you're in the world of Hollow Knight, and there's no question that you're playing Hollow Knight. It really just feels like you cannot replicate it. Like it's such a distinct look, such a distinct atmosphere. Pair that with the music. That's just, honestly, the music is incredible. And you pair that with the combat, which is slow and deliberate, where you have to be incredibly intentional, and it just culminates in this game that is very authentic to itself. And I think that that's what I loved about it. But I did bristle up against that, and I couldn't really articulate why. I didn't complete Hollow Knight, obviously. I didn't even come close. And I walked away fairly early in the game for the reasons that I kind of stated above. But I did figure out why I didn't like Hollow Knight as soon as I started playing Silksong. So let's get into Silksong. I do want to preface this by saying that I do love search action games. I love 2D games, and one of the things that will immediately get me to check out a new game is a unique art style. And I love listening to video game soundtracks. So if you've got amazing soundtrack, it's already, it's jumped to the top of the queue. On paper, Silksong sounds like it should be a game that's made for me. However, I really, really struggled with Silksong. And that's just mostly due to the difficulty. But this game has some incredible highs. So I wanted to celebrate what this game does well, talk about where I bump against it, and then talk about difficulty. And maybe with the difficulties is where I've had some time, or where I have used accessibility options in the past, and what I think maybe Silksong could take from those, but mainly just my experience with other games where I have used accessibility options. So to get into Silksong, it is immediately apparent just how good it feels to play as Hornet which is the character. It's fast, it's frenetic, it's snappy. It feels just amazing to fight as a Hornet, and that's what I love about the game most. It feels like a fighting game. I mean, you have to be so deliberate. Like if you made a misinput, there's no question that you made a misinput, and that is my favorite part about the game. It feels incredible to engage in the combat. It's very clear that there's a high skill ceiling if you're willing to invest in it, and it's very clear where you are, once you get your hands on and where you are in the realm of that. My overall feeling is that the game world is awesome. Unlike Hollow Knight, which felt really dark and oppressive, there are, at least the parts that I saw of Silksong, they felt light and beautiful and kind of overall way more enjoyable to be in. Obviously there are some darker parts, but it's not oppressive. And there definitely is a lot more light and some more green, at least from what I saw. And obviously, like, locations are very important. And, because, those are the environments that you're in. But for me, when I was in these environments, it really felt almost religious. Like, it felt like, it's very fitting because there's a lot of NPCs in this world. They're going on pilgrimages. But it felt as if the environments, there was an importance to them. Both holy and some that are certainly not. The art is incredible. The style, as I understand it, it's called vector art, which is a beautiful blend of art that's made in different depths of the foreground and the background. And it creates this beautiful array of layers, making the world feel alive. And oh my gosh, the art is just so beautiful. I wish I could have seen more of it because the art is really something special. Now, I kind of said that the combat was my favorite part, but there is another crucial element to Silksong, and that's platforming. And that is what I realized after playing this that I didn't like about Hollow Knight. To be honest, I really am not good at platformers. I kind of suck at them. I just never had a foundational experience where I fell in love with a platformer. I never really had a foundational experience where I completed one. It's just kind of like a blind spot for me, which I know is kind of crazy to say because it's one of the most popular genres, but I never had a foundational experience, and it's so hard for me now to jump into a game like this where every aspect of it seems like it would be built for me, but then there's platforming, and I'm just like, I am just not good at this. To me, that was really just the absolute downside of the game. And it's tough because I really like the combat, but I kind of had to acknowledge that about half this game is platforming, and at some point you kind of realize that you're doing, like, part of the combat becomes platforming, and there's a lot of aerials, and I just felt like I hit a wall where I felt like I couldn't progress through the platforming and aerial combat, and I kind of hit my limit. And I guess this is kind of where I'm going to be a little bit more critical of the game and just kind of talk about my experience. So I played Silksong for a little over 4 hours, which is obviously very early days. At first I was just singing through it, rising to the challenge, really enjoying the exploration, obviously loving the art, loving the sounds, really just enjoying being in the world. And there was some platforming, and I made it through. I did, some of the easiest, some of what, they've got to be the easiest, were still a little frustrating to me. The exploration was some of my favorite parts of this early gameplay, and I kind of mentioned that I was on this trip to Luxembourg, and when Silksong released, the weekend before, I had spent the whole weekend in Luxembourg, and I had spent the whole weekend kind of exploring the Casemates of Luxembourg, and the word Casemates is not one that I had heard before this trip. Its relevance and its origin are kind of relegated to a time past when Europe was enduring centuries of warfare. The Casemates are a system of fortified tunnels with vaulted rooms, and they serve two main purposes. One being rooms for the city defenders, where guns and cannons would be fired, but they were also places for housing soldiers from the surrounding areas, as well as storing the supplies to sustain them for up to months at a time. In Luxembourg specifically, I spent hours exploring the kilometers of these ancient subterranean defenses and these tunnels, and picking up Silksong felt like continuing, that journey and a continuation of that experience. And it was really intriguing to me and really sparked my imagination. And that felt really special. Unfortunately, when I returned from my trip, my momentum waned, and I hit a wall with the platforming, and I just found all the enemies to be just a little too brutal. But what really just killed me and really kind of stopped me in my tracks, more than anything, was the excessive runbacks. Which, if you're unfamiliar with the term, much like Casemates, it's been losing its relevance in recent years. Runbacks are where you die, where after you die, you need to run back to the location where you perished in the game. In early platformers and more retro games, this was a limitation of the hardware, limitation of the games and systems, and not having enough memory to give the player a forgiving checkpoint. In Silksong, however, that's not the case, and this is very much intentional, and my honest opinion is that it sucks. Nothing is more disheartening than fucking it up, and you die to an enemy, and you have to spend 5 whole in real life minutes getting back to the area where you met your demise. And it's frustrating, and honestly, you better have used those 5 minutes well. I hope you're significantly better than where you were 5 minutes ago, or you're gonna die in the same spot and have to do that shit all over again. Oh my god, to me that was so frustrating, and I had to walk away. The design of that was just brutal. It was just so brutal and difficult, and the long runbacks. Oh man, I really did not like that. They have been, the popularity of these runbacks have kind of increased in recent years. With many games, from games made by FromSoft or inspired by FromSoft games. Silksong and Hollow Knight are certainly from this camp where they're inspired by FromSoft games. And if you're unaware, FromSoft is the developer behind games like Dark Souls, Sekiro, and Elden Ring. And the reason that I want to bring this up is I had a love affair with Elden Ring this past year. One that I'm honestly not over, despite rolling credits. If you're curious, I got the Age of Stars ending, and the game is certainly brutal but fair. Silksong is also brutal but fair. And both games have, a similar mechanic where once you die, you have to return to the spot of your death and reclaim your XP. And the reason I want to bring this up is now I can only compare, my lived experience from this earth. And in order to make this comparison, I wanted to bring up that I spent over 120 hours in Elden Ring, and I never had a run back like the one that I had in the beginning of Silksong. And I'm like, this is early days. Like, I'm at the beginning of the game. Like, and I saw some clips online, and like I saw some other runbacks that other people had, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is brutal. Like, to be honest, I thought the one that I had was bad, but like some of the other ones, it just feels cruel. And some points it just feels like the game is laughing at you. And I don't know. To me, that was just a step too far. I did have a day where I set aside 2 hours to try and get past the point where I was stuck on. I was like, it's just normal enemies, normal platforming. Surely 2 hours will be fine. And I set aside those 2 hours, try and get past that point. And I started playing, And I was just beating my head against the wall. I was just beating my head up against it. And what was so frustrating is I could feel myself getting better. But I spent 2 hours of my life, like 2 hours of my life that I had to set aside in my weekly schedule to try and get past this. And it was just normal platforming, normal enemies. And I just couldn't do it. And my time was up. I had another commitment. And I just was seething. I was so frustrated. And I was so frustrated that I also just like couldn't let it go. And I wish it didn't, but it just like absolutely ruined my day. And you know, those were the 2 hours that I had to play this video game. I'm sorry, those were the 2 hours I had to play video games that day. And like I set aside 2 hours. I was so proud of myself. Like that's so hard to find, you know, 2 hours of consecutive gaming time, and I just was at the same spot, and I just couldn't get past it. And it wasn't a boss or anything. It was just normal enemies, and that just crushed my morale. And I walked away, and I have no intention of picking up the sticks again. And look, I'm not a game designer. It's very clear that everything in Silksong is intentional. Oh my god, but damn, is it hard? And I don't necessarily know if an easy mode or accessibility options would have made it better. But I do want to talk about where I have used accessibility options in the past and how it made a difference for me. So as I mentioned, I'm not a fan of platformers. I don't seek them out. It's just a blind spot for me. I just don't play them. But there's a little known platformer called Celeste that became popular a few years ago. And like I said, not very good at platformers. And whenever Celeste is brought up in the conversation, its difficulty is front and center. But I was really interested in the story. I thought the art looked gorgeous. I actually had heard some of the soundtrack. I was like, this sounds amazing. And I really wanted to try it out. But obviously, it's really centered around these difficult platforming mechanic. I mean, it's really core to the premise of the game. And fortunately, I knew that this game had accessibility options. They have something called an infinite jump. Actually, I think it's called an infinite dash. But basically, like instead of having a double jump where you can jump twice, or jump twice and then do a dash, you can just infinitely dash and just go up, and just kind of just like dash over all the obstacles. And if I'm gonna be honest, it didn't help me much. I still found this game incredibly hard, even with the infinite jump, infinite dash. It was so hard. I couldn't believe how hard it was even with that. And I really enjoyed the story. I really loved the art. I'm so happy that I got to see it through. I thought the story was incredible. I thought it was really meaningful. And I really thought that it meant something. And the art was beautiful. And just like listening to that music, I mean, it really takes me back to the beautiful pixelscape that is Celeste. And I'm so happy that I got to experience that, even though the platforming far exceeded my skill level with that genre. And I did check back afterwards. There's a resource called How Long to Beat, and it basically aggregates player times and how long it takes to beat something. And even with the infinite jump, my playtime far exceeded the average of How Long to Beat by hours, which I find disheartening personally, but I got to experience the game. I'm trying not to take it personal. I really don't ever play platformers. But I mean, it's just one of those things where I never would have ever, I mean, obviously physically capable of doing it, but like, why would I ever put the time into something, that, I mean, I think most people feel the same way. Why would you, if you don't think investing in something is worth it, you're not going to invest in it. And I was, not having the experience with the genre, there's just no way that I could have done that in a reasonable amount of time. It would have taken me so much to get over that hump with Celeste. And I'm so happy that I got to experience the game. I think it's amazing. I was there for the story. I was there for the art. I was there for the music. and the atmosphere of the game, and I loved that. I'm so happy I got to experience it. And honestly, just because of how difficult it was for me, having an infinite jump didn't lessen it at all for me. I still think back on it, and I still think it was hard as nails. So I guess, moving on to another game that has accessibility options is Hades. And if you're unfamiliar with Hades, it's an action roguelike game where you play as the son of Hades. You play as Zagreus, and he's trying to escape the underworld. It's a fun and engaging hack and slash game, and the combat is really core to the game. It's charming. It has a lot of charming qualities, like the characters and the art, but it is a roguelite. It's a genre that's very popular now, and I think it was very popular when it released, but it's not a genre I had experience with. And they have an accessibility option called God Mode. And every time you die, you basically get like a 1% boost to your health and a 1% boost to the damage you do. And if you're not familiar with roguelikes, it's an experience where you try and complete a run. So there is a linear path ahead of you, but it's very challenging. And oftentimes you'll get kind of boons and buffs and ways to help your character. And every kind of time you go into a run, you're going to be presented with different randomly random upgrades. And I think that's why people like every time you have an experience, every time you do a run, it's going to be completely different. And that felt really intriguing to me. I had never really experienced a roguelike game before that. And I only kind of got it because, I had tried it. I tried it at a friend's place, but I only got it because I knew there was this difficulty mode called God Mode. And let me tell you, I put it on God Mode. It didn't help me very much. It's still so difficult. I really like the combat. I think it's a lot of fun. I think the game is awesome. I've played the game for around 10 hours at this point, and it is still so difficult. At this point, I have not completed a run, and it's a very, very difficult game, and I really don't think that the God mode has helped me very much. It doesn't feel that way, at least. If you're familiar with the game, I cannot seem to get past Theseus and the Minotaur, and I've completed about 20 something runs. So whenever I start, I have like 20% more health and I do 20% more damage than I would have if I was just a normal character. And oh my gosh, I just can't believe how hard it is, even with a 20% increase. And I've been increasing my character. There are things you can find throughout your run that you could permanently upgrade. Either the House of Hades, which is kind of the hub location. You can upgrade that and upgrade your character as well. As well as you find different equipables that you can get by helping different NPCs. And I still, after 20 runs, 10 hours in, I still can't seem to complete a run, and I just feel like I get to this Theseus and Minotaur fight and I just get wiped out. So very, very challenging, and it's kind of like it takes almost like 20. It takes a very long time to get to that point. So by the time that I get there, so many things have had to have gone right for me to get there that it's just so disheartening when you crash out as Zagreus. But I guess all this to say is that I really wish Silksong had a difficulty option, because I can almost guarantee you it wouldn't help me very much. I think this game would still be really hard. But if there was an accessibility option, I do think I probably could have gotten past the part I was stuck on, and I probably could have gotten to experience more of the art and hear more of the music. And those are both kind of why I got the game in the first place. But regardless of my feelings and wishing that maybe there was an accessibility option, you cannot escape the cultural force of Silksong. yeah, ultimately, Silksong just didn't hit for me. I'm currently not looking for that kind of experience, but I do think it's important to keep challenging your taste and perception, and keep trying new games and push yourself out of your comfort zone. But I also think it's very healthy to realize when something isn't working for you and to let it go. I do like hard games, but not always. And some seasons of life warrant different types of experiences. In the season of life that I'm in now, I really want to experience something chill and relaxing, and quite frankly, Silksong just ain't that. I really enjoyed a lot of what I experienced, and I honestly won't soon forget beating the first boss of the game on a balcony in Luxembourg. The sun rising above the city, and I just soon won't forget that. That was awesome. But unfortunately, now is not the time for me to get further into Silksong, and the land of Farloom will be there for me at some point in time. As we wrap up this episode, I did want to say that I played Silksong on the original Switch, and I had no issues with performance. I did have an issue with the ergonomics of the Switch and the Joy-Cons, and I do have special grips that help the ergonomics, but I still had issues with misinputs and like meaning to hit something, and just due to how small the controller is, just hitting something else. And I had a better experience when I moved it to dock mode and played with the Pro controller. But my favorite was playing with my arcade stick or fight pad. And I put the game in docked mode and started playing on the fight pad. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was awesome. So if you have the option to play Silksong on a fight pad, definitely do that. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, the best way you can help me is to share this episode with a friend. And if you want to go the extra mile, I have a Patreon as well. And thank you so much. I will see you in the next one.